The modern sport of strongman as we know it was born from the competition The World's Strongest Man, which first took place in 1977. Back then, athletes from a range of different strength sports were invited to compete for the title of the World's Strongest Man, including pro wrestlers. Today we're going to take a look at some big names in wrestling that tried their hand at strongman and some strongmen that left the sport for the world of wrestling. First up, Jerry Blackwell. Known as Crusher or the Mountain from Stone Mountain, Jerry Blackwell had a very successful career in wrestling starting in the mid-1970s. Blackwell competed in multiple federations throughout his wrestling career and defeated the likes of Larry Zbyszko, Dominic DeNucci and S.D. Jones, but was unsuccessful against high-profile stars such as Andre the Giant and the WWF champion Bob Backlund. In strongman, Blackwell entered the 1979 World's Strongest Man contest, but scored 0 points, having to withdraw due to an injury. He sadly passed away after a car accident in 1995 at the age of 45. Next up, Nathan Jones. The Australian athlete known as Mega Man is one of the tallest men ever to compete in strongman, standing at 211 centimetres tall. The man from the Gold Coast won the 1995 World Strength Championships in Scotland and looked set to make the World's Strongest Man final later in the year before his arm was famously broken by Magnus Samuelsson in an arm wrestling match during the heats. After missing the final again in 1996, Jones branched out into combat sports, trying his hand at MMA before landing a contract with the WWE. The Australian was put in a storyline with WWE legend The Undertaker and took part in WrestleMania 19, but quit not long after and retired from wrestling in 2005. He now makes his living as an actor. Next up, Evan Singleton. Also known as T-Rex, Evan Singleton was known to wrestling fans as Adam Mercer during his short career in the sport. He suffered a severe head injury in a 2012 squash match against Eric Rowan, prompting his retirement from wrestling. The American bulked up and a few years later became a highly successful strongman, making his first international appearance at the 2018 Giants Live North American Open, where he placed 8th. A year later, Evan won the show, earning him a spot at the World's Strongest Man contest. Evan was doing extremely well at his first Worlds, but unfortunately he suffered a serious injury to the bicep, taking him out of the competition in the heats. He's back training harder than ever, and I believe he has everything it takes to become the World's Strongest Man. Next up, Ken Patera. Ken Patera was an accomplished Olympic weightlifter when the AWA signed him up in 1973. In the following years, he played the role of a strongman in the wrestling ring and got the chance to show his powers in the first ever World's Strongest Man competition in 1977. Ken took 3rd place behind Bruce Wilhelm and Bob Young, but it would end up being his only strongman competition. He continued to focus on wrestling, winning the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Championships in 1978 and later teaming up with fellow former strongman Jerry Blackwell. The two would notably win the AWA World Tag Team Championships. Next up on our list, we have Ivan Putski. Joseph Bednarski, better known by his ring name Ivan Putski, started wrestling in 1968 and didn't stop until over 30 years later. He was born in Krakow in 1941, but grew up in Texas and was often introduced as a concentration camp survivor to help him appear sympathetic to the American crowds. Nicknamed Polish Power, Putski won the WWF World Tag Team Championship in 1979 with Tito Santana and enjoyed great success in the wrestling world. He also had a famous feud with fellow strongman Billy Graham. As a strength athlete, Putski participated in his only World's Strongest Man contest in 1978, taking 8th place. He was one of the first European representatives to take part in the competition. Next up, Billy Graham. Billy Graham, known by the ring name Superstar Billy Graham, was the WWF Heavyweight Champion in 1977 and 1978. He also played professional football and took part in bodybuilding contests while training with Franco Columbu and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Superstar was famous for his tremendous physique, becoming one of the first professional wrestlers to sport the look of a bodybuilder. His wrestling career lasted from 1970 to 1987 and brought him multiple titles. In the middle of his wrestling career, Billy Graham bulked up to 325 pounds in 1980 in order to take part in the 1980 World's Strongest Man contest. He finished 7th out of 10, taking 2nd place in the forward hold, but went back to wrestling and did not compete in Strongman again. Our next athlete is Adam Scherr. Known in the wrestling world as Braun Strowman, Adam Scherr is now a famous WWE figure, but he began his professional athletic career as a strongman. Scherr won the 2012 Arnold Amateur Strongman Championships and entered his first Giants Live contest later in the year, finishing 7th. The massive athlete from North Carolina then had to withdraw from the 2013 Arnold Strongman Classic, which proved to be his final strongman competition. Scherr found immediate success in pro wrestling, establishing himself as a member of the Wyatt family in 2015 and becoming a WWE fan favourite. He would go on to become Universal Champion, WWE Intercontinental Champion and WWE Raw Tag Team Champion, and is still very much active in the WWE today. Our next athlete is Tom Mcgee. Canada's Tom Mcgee developed unreal power at a young age, becoming a national powerlifting champion at the age of 23. This earned him an invite to the 1982 World's Strongest Man, where he placed 2nd, winning the loading race and the squat lift. A year later, Mcgee finished 4th at the World's Strongest Man, setting a record in the 18-inch deadlift with 535 kilos. He would keep competing in strongman for multiple years, winning the DFE Mark 10 International from 1984 to 1986, defeating athletes such as Jean-Paul Sigmarsson and Rick Ukiri. Mcgee entered professional wrestling in 1985, wrestling for the WWF and All Japan Pro Wrestling. In 1986, he defeated his compatriot Bret Hart in a famous match before continuing his athletic career in wrestling and strongman up until 1990. Next up, we're bringing out the big gun, Bill Kazmaier. The Kaz himself took part in multiple professional wrestling matches during his career, making his WWF debut in 1986 and signing with various promotions. Kazmaier went to the World Championship Wrestling in the summer of 1991, but was unable to win Lex Luger's WCW World Heavyweight Championship despite multiple attempts. Of course, Bill Kazmaier is more famously known for his incredible achievements in strongman, where he won 3 consecutive World's Strongest Man titles in 1980, 1981 and 1982. Kaz did not get another invite to compete in the World's Strongest Man until 1988, where he was defeated by Jean-Paul Sigmarsson in a close battle. His 5-year hiatus from the World's Strongest Man will forever leave fans wondering how many titles he could have won had he been invited. And finally, topping off the list, Mark Henry. Before his wrestling career, Mark Henry was a 2-time Olympian in weightlifting and was the 1995 WDFPF champion in powerlifting. The big man from Texas made a name for himself in the WWE, making his first appearance in 1996. Known as Sexual Chocolate and the World's Strongest Man, Mark's wrestling career spanned over 2 decades, and he was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2018. In 2002, Mark was invited to compete in the first ever Arnold Strongman Classic, which was held at the famous Arnold Sports Festival in Columbus, Ohio. In that first competition, athletes were invited from a number of strength sports including strongman, powerlifting, weightlifting, and bodybuilding. Mark was warned by Vince McMahon that failing to win the competition would make a mockery of his World's Strongest Man persona and could spell the end of his wrestling career. But Mark put on an incredible performance and took first place in the contest ahead of the man who at the time held the title of the world's strongest man, Sven Carlsen. While Mark never competed in Strongman again after the win, he stayed involved with the Arnold Strongman Classic by returning as part of the presenting team. While you're here guys, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my awesome strength content.